Hey guys, welcome back here to the Fishing Teacher. Appreciate you guys swinging by the channel and spending some time with me today. And we are going to have a bass movement and behavior little seminar tutorial today talking about how bass begin to move into their pre-spawn periods or the late winter, early time spring. What triggers that, what happens, where these fish move to, where you need to look for, and the type of baits that the fish get into as far as, what they prefer this type of transition. Now, what you're going to have with this, guys, at the time of filming this video, we were in the pretty much the middle of January, dead of the winter. But with the increasing daylight hours that happen every single day, as you get closer to February, these fish start making a transition and a move. It's not going to be very long from now, about another 3 or 4 weeks from now, any part of the country, you're going to notice this transition. So I want to go over it in today's video and give you guys some tips and advice on where to look for them at. Also, guys, before we get started, a couple quick things here. I just wanted to remind everybody, if you want to support the Fishing Teacher here and you want to do something to help out, man, the best thing you can do, guys, is just go into my video description of every video, use and bookmark my Tackle Warehouse link. If you want to, if you need tackle to purchase and you can use my link that I put in the description, the channel gets a small percentage of a commission on anything you buy. If you buy a reel or something like that, we get a percentage of the profit. It's not a lot, but it adds up. So that's a good way to help the channel. And also, guys, anybody interested in booking an on-the-water lesson with me, just go to my Facebook page, Randy Blaukat Professional Angler, shoot me a private message, and I'll get you all set up with the details. I really appreciate it. Okay, one of the things that I try to do in the channel here, guys, is I really try to give you guys a mix of like lure techniques and different type of lures and colors and stuff. But I always stress, and if you guys have watched the videos very long, I always talk about you need to be a student of the fish and understand how they move throughout different periods of the year, because every single month of the year the fish do something different. Now sometimes it's subtle and sometimes it's not very much, other times it's a little bit more significant. But one of the most gratifying things about bass fishing is once you understand how these fish move through the seasons based upon, the water temperature differences, increase or, decrease in water temperatures. Daylight hours are super important. The decrease or the increase in daylight hours, that is what makes fish do different things. Now, what I want to talk about today's video is what you got looking forward to coming up here, specifically in the month of February. Okay, here's some things that trigger it. One of the things that a lot of people focus in on a lot is water temperature, as far as fish changing up and wanting different baits. And there is a little bit of truth to that, but that's not the major thing. When you're talking about bass moving from like their winter, stage, or the winter mood and personality, or the places they live in the winter time, and then when they start to move up into the pre-spawn period where they're thinking about, they're not spawning, but they're thinking about moving up and looking for those type of areas, there's a transition there. And that transition, guys, the number one thing that causes this is the increase in the daylight hours. It's not the water temperature, because I have fished in several different or lots of different scenarios. Let's say, for example, it's, late February, it's March, it's definitely into the pre-spawn, but for whatever reason, there's some weather system that comes in that keeps the water temperature really cold. In fact, I've seen some situations like in February, March, where there's ice on the lake here in the Ozarks, but the fish start to move shallow. Even though there's ice on the lake, these fish are moving shallow and the water's cold. It's not the water temperature that's moving them up there, it's the increase in the daylight hours. So one of the biggest myths in fishing is a lot of people, they think water temperature influences how fish change in their patterns, and it's not. It's the daylight hour decrease or increase that triggers some type of an internal biological response in the fish. So always remember that. Do not pay that much attention to water temperature, but pay attention to the daylight hours as they increase. Now, this daylight increase that happens during the early spring and late winter time, it usually occurs in most parts of the country between mid part of February to the first part of March. This is when this transition takes place more significantly than any other time. And what you're going to notice during this period in terms of how to catch the fish and where the fish live at is, let's say, for example, these bass are in their wintertime places and they're deep off of points, or they're suspended off of points, or they're out in general in deeper water. They're living in deeper water. One of the first things that happens once you start getting in from like January to mid-February, is a percentage of those bass, not all of them, because not all the bass do the same thing on a lake at any one time. There's bass that are early, there's bass that are late, but in general, the overall population begins to want to move shallow, and they want to stay on the bottom. So let's say, for example, you got a bass he's been living out in 35 foot of water on this main lake point all winter long. And that's been his spot. He's just been living out there. Come about the second part of February, that bass that's living on that main lake point will start making a move. And one of the first places they make a move to is a channel bank that is close to that point. So say, for example, this bass is living out in 35 foot of water on this point, and maybe a quarter of a mile down the lake, you've got this nice bluff bank or this nice really steep rocky bank where the channel swings in close to it. A lot of times that bass will move from that point up to that steep rocky bank, and he'll set on that rocky bank in about 5 to 10 foot of water, and he'll live there for like a month until the water temperature gets warming up and the daylight hours advance a little bit more to where he moves from that rocky point or that rocky bank into the nearest flatter spawning area, spawning cove or whatever. That's the places these fish get into. It's called staging areas, and these staging areas are areas that have some type of a proximity to deeper water that are relatively close to a spawning area. So it depends on the type of lake you're fishing. Guys, if you're fishing a lake like a grass lake or something like that, they could be out off the edge of a deeper grass drop off or a deeper grass flat close to a spawning bed. Say, for example, if you're fishing Lake Gunnersville and it's wintertime, pre-spawn, getting close to pre-spawn, these fish will move up out of that main river channel a lot of times, and they'll move up onto these big, vast grass flats close to the main river, but they're close to like a bay. There may be a bay back in behind this flat, and they're staging on that grass out there and that deeper grass flat, and they'll move up to that shallow flat in those bays and spawn in another month or so. Every lake is different how it's set up, but the thing that everything has in common with that is these staging areas are places that fish move to right before they move up shallow to spawn. And every lake's set up different. So here in the Ozarks, in my part of the country, it's the channel banks. If you're fishing a TVA lake, it could be a main lake flat. If you're fishing in Florida, it could be a deeper grass edge. If you're fishing a lake like Lake Hartwell or Lake Murray in South Carolina, where you've got more sandy type areas, it could be, those sandy clay type areas that are close to deep water that are next to a spawning area. So that's what you have to look for. The next thing to remember, along with once you find these fish, is your bait selection begins to change. In the winter time of the year, bass prefer smaller baits, like smaller jerk baits, downsized swim baits, Alabama rigs with small swim baits, quarter-ounce jig and spoons, little spy baits. As that water temperature starts to warm up into the low 50s or around 50 and those daylight hours increase, the number one thing you're going to notice is bass want a larger bait. And this is when, once that water temperature hits about 50 and you started to, it's starting to get light more and it's fairly light around 7 o'clock in the morning, big spinnerbait, chatterbait, full-size jig, larger crankbait, bigger swim bait, something like that. They want a bigger meal during the early spring. They're trying to build up their energy and their egg sacs. They're trying to get protein to build their egg sacs up, and they're wanting big meals during that time of year. So the two things that you remember, let me give you just a brief, quick piece of advice here coming up. Once February starts getting here, guys, the second week of February, doesn't matter where you're fishing, go to those steeper areas that are close to deep water and upsize your lure size. If you do those two things, I can almost assure you're going to catch some quality fish with that. And one little tip I'll give you guys here coming up like in February, March, if you want to catch quality fish, guys, try a big spinnerbait. A big 3/4 ounce spinnerbait with like a number 6 willow leaf blade on it is probably the number one best quality fish lure for the early springtime like that. So anyway, I hope it helps you guys catch some, guys, and we'll talk later. See you.